Hey, this is Nicole Kelly, host of Disarming Disability. Thanks for listening to the following show on Public House Media.
This is Jenna Burt, host of the Confessions of a Military Spouse podcast here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Confessions of a Military Spouse, where we dig deep and talk about the unspoken hard truths of what it's really like to be a military spouse. A new show comes out bi-weekly. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Confessions of a Military Spouse. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hello and welcome to Beauties and Headcanons, where we're nerdy, and you probably are too. I'm Elisabeth, and I'm here today with Lindsay, and with the recent announcement of Pokemon Sword and Shield, along with the impending release of the Detective Pikachu movie, we wanted to go ahead and talk a little bit about Pokemon, about how we've been introduced to it, about where we sit in the franchise, and maybe even our favorite Pokemon if we happen to have one, or maybe the Pokemon we can't stand if we also have a certain Pokemon that we can't stand. So, Lindsay, I'm not sure where everything came in with you, because I remember growing up, even though Pokemon was pretty much forbidden for me, I remember seeing a bunch of the merchandise like everywhere in the mid-90s once it came out.
Yeah, well, see, mid-90s, I was 11 years old or so, and I think it was kind of more a thing that my little sister was into. I remember watching the television show with her, of course, and that would have been like the 1999, so I guess late 90s, because I looked it up, and the television series actually was like 1999 and onward, and it is all available on Netflix if you're feeling like binging some classic early 2000s cartoons. And of course, it really has the feel that a lot of stuff I was watching had. You know, I was more into Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, that kind of thing coming from Japan. But it was kind of cool to see other world of different animals, Pokemon, and for my sister to get into it. You were talking about how even though you weren't really able to engage in it, you still saw it in stores. And I don't really remember anything like that. But to be fair, I probably wasn't looking for it. You know that phenomenon of when you buy a new car and you don't see that car anywhere and you're like, oh, cool, I've got a cool new car. Nobody else is going to have this car. And then you're out on the road and everybody has your car.
Yep. I totally understand. And I mean, that was one thing that I did growing up, was that, you know, things that was kind of banned for me or that I wasn't supposed to be into, I always kind of like was more in tune for it, you know, supposed to, you know, block it out, you know, but of course I was like, no, I'm interested and I want to know more. And I just remember seeing, like, especially when I would go into like a toy store or something like that, seeing all of those packs of cards and be like, ooh, I wish I could get some of those, even though I had like no idea like what they were used for. I just remember I was so intrigued by them. I wanted to learn more. And I mean, there were magazines and of course all kinds of like plush toys and all kinds of various and sundry things. I think this was around the time that Beanie Babies was still really strong and very popular. So I think it kind of almost went hand in hand for some people, at least, because I remember a bunch of the merchandise tended to be around the Beanie Babies, or at least that was my experience in stores, you know?
Sure.
All of the pop culture icon toys were all kind of grouped together.
Were you able to play with Beanie Babies? Like, did you guys...
Oh yeah. The Beanie Babies were fun for some, I guess because they were like just collectible plushies, but Pokemon, I guess, were different because, at least from what I was told, not that I believe this or anything like that, but I was told that Pokemon, like the creatures and the games and stuff were demonic. So
okay,
yeah, that was the whole thing.
See, and that's interesting to me too, because, you know, a lot of things that we talk about or or delve into in nerddom and fandoms have the potential to be things you kind of obsess over.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like maybe that's the concept that was avoided, like obsessing over something that wasn't real or had the potential to be obsessed over. Does that make sense? I don't know.
It does, but I know their intention, and I know that they 100% believed that the Pokemon were representing actual demons. And I know it sounds crazy, but
well, okay.
That's how it is growing up in a cult sometimes. It's just weird, and sometimes there is really no explanation, but here we go. Years later, I'm sitting down here and now talking about Pokemon, and I play Pokemon Go, and I'm excited to see the Detective Pikachu movie, and I'm excited for the new game release. So it's kind of interesting how life just kind of turns everything around sometimes.
Right. Well, and I never played any of the games or anything. So looking into what Pokemon is now versus what it was then is really interesting to me. There was some company was making funny little Pokeball things that you could collect a bunch of. I feel like that was a thing. I don't know if it was in like a McDonald's meal or what it was, but
more than likely.
So I feel like I remember that. I might remember little figurines of different Pokemon. Maybe there was like a card game or something, because there was a card game for everything, wasn't there?
Oh, yeah. It was a pretty big card game. And I think it was, maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I think it was coming out around the same time as Yu-Gi-Oh!
Oh, yeah. I got them confused because you never really knew which ones were which.
Yeah. But yeah, and then there was Digimon that came out, I know, around the same time as Pokemon, and there's
oh my goodness, what's the difference? Hold on a minute.
And there's one more. I can't think of it, but I think there was one more that was kind of similar, kind of in premise, and that involved cards, but I can't remember it right now. But yeah, I remember there was like quite a few different like card-based anime type of things going on in the mid to late 90s.
It's funny too, because I was just at that anime convention, and I think I might have seen one, maybe two people dressed as Team Rocket and maybe one Ash, but like that's kind of a missed market. Like you see the big dinosaur costumes and how hilarious that is. Someone in a Pikachu costume would be hilarious. It doesn't mean that they weren't there, but that would have been pretty cool. I'm always trying to come up with ways to like reimagine things that aren't the full body suit. So thinking of like facial prosthetics to make yourself look like that weird clown Pokemon thing.
That would creep me out.
It would creep me out, but it'd be kind of interesting. So there is that new trailer coming out for that live action thing where Ryan Reynolds is going to be doing the voice of Pikachu, and it's like this weird, he's not saying Pikachu all the time. Instead, he's actually got Reynolds' voice, or Deadpool's voice, whatever you want to. But it's interesting to me because it's the thing about Pokemon is like a lot of the stuff we are into that started in the late 90s and has evolved in a way. There are certain things that aren't as recognizable as they used to be, that have grown up with us and been changed in some way, shape, or form. It's interesting because I was watching that trailer, and that clown Pokemon looks exactly like I remember it being drawn in 1999,
Yeah.
Still creepy, of course.
Yes.
And now it's a CGI animated thing, and that's even creepier, but I could still recognize it as that thing. Even Pikachu having hair is recognizable to me. I do think it's interesting that, 19 years later, a lot of these things still look the way they did before. And, kudos to the company for making that happen, because even with Pokemon Go, a lot of that centered around catching the Pokemon with a very geocaching app on your phone. And I really loved it when it first came out. And then when it first came out, it was really hard to get into for me. Because all I was doing was catching rat-a-tats all the time.
Oh yeah, mine was Spiros and Rattatas. They were everywhere.
Oh, did I say it wrong? I'm sorry. So I caught enough of those and I got bored. And there was that period of time where people were like driving their cars and trying to catch Pokemon at the same time. And
yeah, I picked it up, I think, very soon after it got released. And yeah, at the beginning it was kind of like a grind, but eventually, like, I think I leveled up enough to where I like unlocked more. I don't know. And I never used it when driving.
Right.
If my husband was driving, I would use it because I'm not the one driving, so it's okay, right?
And then, do you remember when the app actually like came up with that thing where it says you're going way too fast to be someone who's just walking?
That's not a very accurate thing. I don't think. I'm not sure what it's measuring because I was literally sitting on my bed one time playing it, and it popped up saying that, and I'm like, I'm literally just sitting here.
Okay. To be fair, the only times it ever showed up for me was when someone was driving. Like I was having my daughter play the game while I was driving at some point in time. So yeah, I never had it come up when someone wasn't driving. But then, like on my way to work, it was really tempting to be like, oh, I know that's a stop right there. I know that.
Yeah.
And there was a period of time where I was working at night and I was working at a hospital, and it's a main hospital here in Milwaukee. I would go on runs to go to certain places in the hospital, and I would, pull up my phone real covertly to get that Pokestop right now. So...
Well, yeah, you got to do that. And also, I mean, like, the more you walk too, the more you hatch your eggs. So, I mean, you got to do that some way.
Yeah. Just as we were about to start recording, I opened up my app because I'll admit I don't really play it all that often. And I totally was told by my app that I haven't walked any kilometers today at all. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's trying to shame you, like, oh, you should be out walking.
I mean, it's a good thing for that,
Yeah, it gives you a little extra incentive to, hey,
And that was part of the thing, too. They were talking about how it was also kind of promoting family togetherness and getting people up and moving. I feel like that's kind of a cool thing.
I think Nintendo has always been very innovative in trying to try out new things and push new boundaries. And admittedly, it hasn't always worked, but when it does work, I think it works great. So like the whole idea of Pokemon Go, I think, even though I don't think as many people are playing it now as they were when it first came out, I think it's still, something that people will, pull up and play just on the fly, or do this or do that, go out and take a walk, or maybe go play with their kids or something like that. And, they kind of, I know the recent games that they released back in November, Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, they kind of tried to keep that in the same vein. And now with the new games coming out with Sword and Shield, they're coming back a little bit more into their more traditional games. And so, it's really cool to see them kind of expand their repertoire and kind of, feed into something a little bit different and, experiment with that. But I also do appreciate that, but I also appreciate them, still coming back to and recognizing their roots and where their main core of players are at, and, doing something for them, and to say that, hey, we've done Pokemon Go, we've done this Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, and but we haven't forgotten about you. We're still going to keep making these games that we know our core players still love,
Right. Yeah, definitely. And what I do think, like I said earlier, I think the coolest thing is that it's still recognizable. Even with the live action thing, they're at least staying true to what the Pokemon look like. And I watched a few movies from 2014 and on, and everything is still very much recognizable, the same, something that I'm used to seeing. So even though Ash is traveling with different people, and it's not, I'm going to date myself here, but Brock, I remember Brock. But Team Rocket is the same. There's some other new thieves that were in one of those movies that I watched, but still a very, very similar thing. And yeah, sure, he's traveling with other people. What I think is weird, actually, is how is Ash still the same age?
I have no idea. I think that's one of the things in the community is just like Ash is just this perpetual child. Is it some sort of magic? Does he have some sort of medical condition? I'm not sure.
I mean, I just feel like, has there been 365 things yet? Because these don't all happen in one day, but
Yeah.
he's got to at least be 11 at this point.
Is he ever going to go to high school?
Oh, no. Do you know what is the thing about becoming a Pokemon master? What do you have to do in order to become a Pokemon master?
Don't you have to just like catch all the Pokemon?
Catch them all?
That's the whole premise, gotta catch them all.
Uh-huh. I mean, I guess so.
And be the very best. That's what the theme song says.
It's really interesting to me because they focus a lot on how Ash is different with Pikachu, or even the people that he is around. They really focus on Pokemon being their friends, not their like things.
Yeah, not like a possession. I wouldn't even say pet because I mean, obviously I treat my cat like she is my daughter, so like a family member instead of just something that you have.
They originally started on Nintendo, right?
Oh yes, it's been a Nintendo thing. I remember I was reading about the different regions that it's taken place in because the new game that's coming out is supposed to take place in this region named Galar, I think it's called. Each region that they've been in kind of at least bears some resemblance to a real life place.
Oh, okay.
And the new region is supposed to be more or less the UK. So England, Scotland, Wales, I'm guessing. I don't know if they'll expand into Ireland or Northern Ireland or whatever, but it's supposed to be that area. And I went back because I was curious what the other regions were and what they corresponded to. And obviously most of them are in Japan. Some of them even being named after certain places in Japan. Especially the earlier ones like Kanto and Johto, they're, obviously Japanese. But some of the regions are based on other places. Like, I believe Alola was based on a place in Hawaii. I think it was mostly Maui and Oahu and around that area. There was another region that was based on mainly Manhattan and the surrounding area in New Jersey. And there was also a region based in France. So it's really interesting to see them kind of expand from just Japan to other regions because it gives us more, I guess, like a backstory for the whole world. Instead of just being centered in one place or around one region, we get to see more of the world as it is in Pokemon, and not just the one region. So I think it's really pretty cool that they're expanding even further and going beyond that.
Do the voice actors have different accents?
To be honest, I'm not sure because outside of the trailer, I don't think there's really been that much information released on Sword and Shield, at least that I saw before we started recording. But I know it has become a memeable thing for people to take this picture of a trainer who I guess is supposed to be Scottish and just put some very stereotypical Scottish text on her to indicate that she's saying. And I can't repeat any of it because Scottish people like to swear a lot. So, but it's really hilarious to see how people are like equating the world of Pokemon to like real life things and to real life culture that actually exists. It's kind of funny to see that in action.
I feel like there's so much to know and so much to learn, and that's with any fandom really. The fact that there are so many different things to learn and know, and the way that things have evolved and changed as we've grown older. A while ago, Aurelia and I went to a concert where the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra played music from Pokemon, and some of them were very recognizable songs and some of them weren't. And being someone who never really got into it as much, it was interesting to me because they had a screen where they showed you like the different Pokemon games that they were trying to symbolize as this journey through battle sequences and different Pokemon that you meet. And it was really neat because, of course, it was Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra, but it brought a different element to it. I think it was Pokemon Evolution or something they were calling it. And of course, Aurelia was super stoked at that point and wanted to start playing the game and all of these other things. But it's one of those things where we haven't gotten away from it. There are so many other animes and things that have kind of fallen to the wayside. I feel like things that I grew up with aren't really as prominent now. You're kind of old school if you're into those things.
Yeah, Pokemon is one of those that is just stuck around
Right.
and remained relevant. And I mean, maybe it's because, it's attached to games and, obviously people keep working on the games and releasing them. As to, if it was just a series, maybe it would have just, kind of sloughed off and, become a thing of the past. Just, one of the things that when people talk about the 90s, you think of, oh yeah, Pokemon. That was one of the things that people were into,
Right. Well, so do you have a Pokemon that's like your least favorite?
Probably the creepy clown is one of my least favorites because I really don't like clowns. And so he is definitely up there. I'm also surprisingly not a huge fan of Pikachu, and that's probably weird. Maybe it's because he was always pushed as, being so popular and like being Ash's companion and everything like that. Like, I'm the kind of weird person where I don't necessarily like to gravitate towards what's most popular just because it's popular.
Mm-hmm.
Like if there's a reason for me to like it, I'll like it. But if I'm not really given a clear reason to like something, I don't really tend to like it. And I tend to like it less when it's pushed as being, oh, it's so popular, everybody likes it. But no reason is really given. So yeah, I kind of dislike Pikachu a little bit on principle just because I don't see the appeal, I guess, above my favorite Pokemon.
So the clown's name was Mr. Mime.
Mr. Mime. Oh, it's so creepy.
I do feel like I remember it when he would do an attack, he would be like, mime? And I feel like that was even worse in a way. I agree with you, though. I never liked Pikachu. I don't know why. Even when you play Pokemon Go, you get like a little companion. And I know Pikachu was that to Ash and woohoo. But I just... Same thing. He was like the most popular. Everybody loved Pikachu. I just couldn't get into it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Who was your favorite? Or did you have a favorite?
I have a few favorites. Out of the starters, Squirtle is my absolute favorite.
Okay.
I think because he resembles a turtle so much, and I love turtles. So he was obviously, my favorite out of all of like the classic starters. Out of the current ones, it's like out of the non-starters, it's kind of a tie between Oddish because it's so cute. It's like a little radish, especially the way it kind of dances. I don't know. It's just adorable.
I feel like I have to look that up.
It's so cute. And then my one of my favorites is Eevee, and I know that was one of Emily's as well, because Eevee can actually evolve into a wide variety of different things. And I know a lot of people are really like hype on Umbreon, but honestly, my favorite is Sylveon because Sylveon evolves out of love. And like if the Eevee has a lot of love for its trainer, it will evolve into a Sylveon. Aww. So I it's just adorable.
That's
Come on.
cute.
How can you not love an Eevee?
I mean, okay.
And plus it looks like a little dog.
Okay.
Like a not as fluffy Pomeranian. Maybe that's my opinion, but that's what it kind of looks like to me.
I would have to say that my favorite was Jigglypuff.
That is also a solid choice.
Yeah, but whatever Jigglypuff evolves into, I know I didn't like that.
See, I don't like what Oddish evolves into either. I just like Oddish, the little radish.
What is Bulbasaur?
That's one of the starters, I believe.
Okay, I know I liked Bulbasaur.
Yeah, he was the plant starter. Squirtle was the water, Bulbasaur was the plant, Pikachu was electricity, and then Charizard was the fire.
Okay. And it's interesting to me too, like, I know some people who, when we were growing up, I don't know how into Pokemon they were, but even now, my daughter's father's family, when we get together and we're doing something for Thanksgiving or whatever, and I've been blessed to be invited, I've had the opportunity to like watch them go out on walks with the dogs or with Aurelia or whatever to go up the street where they know a Pokestop is so that they can go do a battle or whatever. And I feel like super old because I'm sitting there like, yeah, I stopped playing before I even hit level 10. And they laugh at me so hysterically because they're like, oh, we're level whatever they are, and they're going to go do a battle. And I never got to win a battle, so I never even got to that point. They're so funny because they're still into it. They're still doing it. And they even had like a convention or something at a zoo down here. You had to buy a ticket, and there was only so many tickets that were sold, but you could go, and they had like massive Pokemon battles and stuff in that area, that they had this event going on. And I think that's kind of cool. You know, when you get down to the nitty gritty of it, it's super nerdy and something that the family can kind of do together. But in a weird way, it's also like you still have your phone out. You're still not really interacting with each other. It's still sort of a weird thing to be doing.
Yeah.
And when it first came out, when Pokemon Go first came out, I felt like that was sort of the thing too. Like, sure, you're out walking, but you're looking down at your phone and not paying attention to what's around you and not necessarily interacting with the people around you. Like, it's sort of a double-edged sword. Like a lot of things in our lives are, to be fair.
Well, yeah. Yeah, you just kind of, you take the positive, and there may be some negative with it, but sometimes you just got to enjoy what you have. I mean, I think that's true for a lot of different things, not just, the whole Pokemon Go and mobile and gaming, Sometimes if something has a positive effect, even if there is a little bit of a negative downside, sometimes you just got to enjoy that positive.
Yeah, that makes sense. I did want to ask you one last thing. When you played Pokemon Go, do you remember what's the name of those different colors?
Oh, the teams?
Yeah, the teams.
Yeah, so there were 3 different teams for Pokemon Go. There was Team Valor, which was red. There was Team Mystic, which was blue. And then there was Team Instinct, which was yellow.
What do they mean?
They're just the different team that you're on. And so when somebody captures a gym, if you're on that team, you can put your Pokemon in that gym to defend it. And then when another team comes along, then you can fight them for it. So it's basically like a way to up the competition factor of it. Instead of just being, going out and collecting, you have a team that you contribute to, that you can go out and fight with and fight for and everything like that.
Okay, so it's not based on anything. It's just that you pick a color and voila.
It's not quite like the sorting
house or anything, right?
Yeah, you choose.
I love that you know where I was going with that.
Yes. And just in case anybody was wondering, I was Team Instinct because I followed my instinct to which team to go to. And so I thought, well, obviously, I have to be Instinct then, right? Do you remember what team you were?
I don't know. I still have my app open because I'm doing an experiment. How do I find out?
I think you go to just your profile, and it should be, once you see your actual player character, then the background should be red, blue, or yellow, depending on what team you are.
Oh, it's blue.
Then you are Mystic.
That makes sense.
Mystics are kind of Ravenclaw-ish because they're smart, and they're all about trying to evolve and, figure out the best way to evolve the best Pokemon and everything like that. And then Valor was supposed to be the team that, is all into fighting the different Pokemon and, winning battles and stuff like that. And then Instinct was, which is me, totally me. It was just all about going out and collecting the different Pokemon. At least that's the way that the different trainers were supposed to be, I guess. I don't. But I thought it was fitting for me because that was pretty much all I cared about, is just going out and collecting them.
Right, that makes sense. And I think that's kind of what I would have been into as well. It looks like you could only become a trainer at level 5. I'm really excited. The coolest thing, too, about watching those movies today was that not only did Ash not age, so I was still a little weirded out about that, but because, I'm 18 years older, so he should have aged a little bit, but that it was still very recognizable, and the movies were able to stand alone by themselves. And I feel like a lot of the episodes did that, too. Once you know that Team Rocket is this, and Ash is this, and he's with these people, each episode really kind of has the opportunity to be a standalone episode. And, with other shows, we don't really get that opportunity. You kind of have to know what's happening by episode 7 of She-Ra. You can't jump into it sometimes.
Yeah, it's got the continuing story going along when you'll kind of be lost.
And that's just it, is like there's a story arc a lot of the times with all of these things that we talk about, all these shows, all these different fandoms, and Ash is still trying to become a Pokemon master. And I wonder if that's sort of the idea of the thing too, is that they can always create another Pokemon. He can always not be a Pokemon master. He might not have already caught them all. What are they going to do when he catches them all? You know?
Exactly.
That's sort of the story arc. That's sort of the plan. And if he doesn't make it, then he doesn't make it.
Before we wrap up, I wanted to talk really briefly about one of the headcanons that I know Emily had mentioned when we were talking about this episode.
Oh, yes.
And that was that Pokemon and the world of Pokemon involves the Japanese spirit world. So obviously we know that Pokemon takes place in its own like universe or dimension or, you know, whatever we want to call it. And obviously there are creatures that are Pokemon that are very reminiscent of creatures that we see in our world. You know, kind of like how an Eevee resembles a dog, you know, and how a Spearow resembles a certain bird and stuff like that, you know. But at the same time, there are all kinds of different and sometimes outright weird Pokemon that maybe doesn't always seem to have a like something to represent it in this world, at least not at first glance. And so this is where the whole spirit world aspect comes in, is that Pokemon, potentially, the dimension that it inhabits is the Japanese spirit world. And some of these different Pokemon that we might not recognize are actually different types of Japanese spirit creatures. And I have examples, of course, because I had to research this because this was just absolutely fascinating to me.
Okay.
So I might not always say these names perfectly because, you know, I suck at pronunciation and stuff like that. So if I pronounce it wrong, I'm sorry. One in particular was called a Saze Oni, which is also known as a turban shell ogre. It's a giant turban shell with a human body coming out of its shell head, and they turn into women and pretend to be drowning as like humans go by on their boats. And so basically like a siren, they kind of like lure them to their deaths.
Okay.
In other words. And there is a type of Pokemon who with its evolution seems to be indicative of that particular creature. It's actually the Slow family. The Slow King is the evolution that seems to be the closest. But I mean, obviously they're all inspired by it because the further the evolution goes, the more it kind of comes out of its shell, kind of. And once one of them evolves, I think it's Slowpoke, they actually become a water psychic type instead of, I think it's just a psychic type before. So it actually like kind of indicates what it's involved with in the first place.
Okay.
And another specific one that I found was the Sogenbai, which I guess it's like a Japanese version of Will-o'-the-Wisp. It's supposed to be like a man's head surrounded by flames floating around in the sky at night. It kind of, the whole backstory behind it was began with a monk who lived in Kyoto who was supposed to be like really bad at his job. He would, I guess, like steal from the temple and, you know, sell it off for money and kind of like, you know, got a whole like little side hustle on there. And when he died, he was reborn in hell and he was forced to wander the earth. And when you see his floating head, that's supposed to be like his tortured spirit and all that. And obviously, if you look at like the Pokemon roster, you see Ghastly sitting there. That is a floating head. And I mean, it's not quite covered with fire, but it looks like, you know, the smoke that's coming off of it that could be fire. So that to me makes me wonder if he is supposed to represent Sogen, the old monk. And those aren't the only ones. Those are just like the bigger ones that I kind of ran into. But all of these things. I mean, obviously, the creators of Pokemon drew a lot of inspiration from the world around them. And being in Japan, obviously, they have, a lot of knowledge of the, like the myths and everything that surrounds their culture, their own culture. So, I mean, obviously, they're more apt to draw from that than something like, I don't know, Bigfoot or something that you would probably find if you came over to America and did kind of something similar here. So, but I mean, it kind of makes you wonder then if, since they're all basing these in the spirit world or from their, different spirit creatures, does that therefore mean that they're from this, that this whole world of Pokemon actually takes place in the spirit world then?
I feel like it would have to sort of be two different planes, that the Pokemon are almost on a different plane than everyone else. So it'd have to be sort of like a combining of the two.
So kind of like if our world and the Japanese spirit world combined at some point, like there was some point where our planes melded into one.
Right.
That does make sense. Because there are still like differences, obviously.
Right, and there's still people. Like the people would have to be at the point where they are in the spirit world but don't know that they are.
Mm-hmm.
Or they'd have to be living residual lives, Yeah,
like just going on, not even realizing
that they had become in the spirit world.
The thing that kind of interested me about this whole thing was, obviously the creative process and what they all came, used to come up with all of these different creatures.
Sure.
And, obviously, one of the big things with writing, one of the things you hear all the time is, oh, write what you know,
Mm-hmm.
Which sometimes is helpful, sometimes isn't. But, when you do use the knowledge that you have, you realize you don't always have to use it in the same straightforward way. You can make it different. You can twist it around a little bit. And I think that's where all of these Pokemon or these spirit-inspired Pokemon have come from, at least from a writer's perspective, is, taking these familiar concepts, these familiar ideas, and changing them up enough to where maybe you wouldn't recognize them immediately, but if you look a little bit deeper underneath the surface, you can still see the source and the inspiration for it.
Well, I think that's all we have for today on Pokemon. I know there's a whole lot going on regarding the new live action, as well as the new game that is coming out based in the UK. Let us know what you think and what you want to inform us about as far as Pokemon go. I feel like we have a whole lot that we could have talked about and a whole lot of other things that we did talk about that maybe you didn't want us to talk about. So let us know. Give us a message on any of our social medias, or send us any kind of information you could possibly want to. We do still have that store open, and I believe there might still actually be a discount going on. I've managed to buy a cup and a new t-shirt from the new company. So there's all kinds of new designs going on there. And we do have the new Talk Nerdy to Me, We Talk Nerdy to You shirts. I have had some people make some comments about that shirt too, so I wear it as often as I possibly can. Thanks for talking about Pokemon with us today. I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Elisabeth, and thanks for getting nerdy with us on Beauties and Headcanons.